You have a posted warm-up. There are some of the due dates, but not all of them, and that's not final. And we have a bunch of little things to talk about today. Yeah, bro.
Nothing to tomorrow, right?
Nothing to tomorrow. Does anybody here know a period of testing coming up in the next few weeks in your English classes? Has anybody heard about this? Probably.
This is going to be another really long one.
So nobody here knows about the period of testing that's about to start. There's like some standardized tests you take in your English classes for about a week. That's right, the one that's placing star testing. I'm just hoping that one of you would know these dates. Yeah, I'll look into it. All right. Does anybody remember the answer to today's warm-up? It was in the movie at the beginning. How many units of trash are made for every unit of trash in the consumer's home?
Was it like 3 to 1?
It was what?
7?
7? No, it's more than 7. It was in that movie at the very beginning when they talked about like the golden arrow and the 5 stages of production. The one with Annie Leonard, the woman who was talking. Yeah. It was inspired by when she got her iPod or iPhone or something.
Like 20.
It's a lot more than those.
70.
The number is 70, 70. And so for every time that you're taking that container out to the curb on Wednesday mornings or whatever, imagine that 70 times that volume were produced somewhere else to deliver you those consumer goods. This unit is about that process. It's about the ins and outs of our material economy. So the mining that brings things into your economy and the waste disposal that takes things out of your economy. Are there any questions about the warm-up or about the papers you just grabbed? Okay, then a bunch of stuff. And James, happy belated birthday. So, was anybody absent Friday other than Lexi? Cedar, when do you want to take your test?
Tomorrow at lunch?
Has to be today sometime, but you can pick the time. Okay. Any feedback about the substitute? I assume that my teaching assistants ran the class for you. Sam Daisy, anything you want me to know about the sub? Oh, right, I remember that. Yeah, great. Anybody have anything spectacular to share about their spring break? Anybody travel? Anybody go someplace rad? Not rad? You ride?
Yeah.
Dead snow?
Yeah, they did. One did. I actually snowed quite a bit.
Wicked. Not rad?
No.
How was that?
It's pretty skinny, but
Sure. Nobody else traveled? Yeah? New York? Not rad or rad? Yeah. Did you see the cherry blossoms in Brooklyn with the Botanic Garden? Right. Yeah. Yeah, the cherries come real early, so that's possible. I'm pretty sure that they were blooming this last week. They always, I've spent a lot of spring breaks there, and I always go catch those things spring break. Yeah.
On Wednesday, does it say 1.2 or 1.1?
That's a 1, sorry. Okay, well, I went to Yosemite with my family. That was great. I took my daughter on the first multi-pick route. That was spectacular. I wish I could show you the picture, but my photo screen doesn't communicate with my devices aren't on the same photo screen somehow.
You didn't say iPod, right?
Thought I was, but there's like in the new operating system, there's like a difference about like what you put on the cloud compared to the old ones. So something happened when I got my new iPhone that it doesn't go. Maybe it's not at the same speed because sooner or later they show up, but it's kind of clunky. Like back in the day, they would be like immediate. I could take a picture and see it on me. But somehow that seems to have slowed down. Anyway, I can't show you the picture of my daughter climbing Yosemite, but it was awesome. She climbed super hard. It was really great. And we went with the Carmians. Do you all know the Carmians? Yeah. Yeah, so we went with the Carmian and his family. It was great. Did I miss anything here? Did anything of interest happen in Santa Barbara? How was the weather? Hot? How was the diving? Anybody dive last week? It was not good. So tomorrow your solar house models are due. Are there any questions about the solar house models?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Bring in the posters.
You do not need to bring in the posters. You do need to bring in the Don't Lose This, which is probably attached to your Unit 8. And you need to bring in the key. That's totally mandatory. You don't get a grade on the house if you don't have those things. You can always get graded for it later. Yeah.
Can I get Unit 8 back?
Kieran Hook. Can we pass this back to Kieran?
Wait, you said don't use this page. What else?
Jaime Mel.
That's a legend. Oh, yeah.
Cedar, this is for you. Coming back.
You have to keep it.
Yes. So here's what you will need to get credit for your house tomorrow. The Don't Lose This paper, which is attached to Unit 8, and the key, which has some check marks on it by now in red Sharpie from me. You'll need that original, those original papers. How many of you think you know where the key is right now? How many of you are worried that your knucklehead partner or something has lost it? Everybody laughed, but it's not that funny. Okay.
I know.
Nobody should stress about tomorrow. It's 2 more weeks anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I heard he gives the money.
Like the boy who cried wolf, I really mean it. It is due tomorrow.
Right.
And because of some conversations I'm hearing, let me be specific. You must have the original key. Yes.
I mean, I have it. It's just a photo.
You have it?
I mean, I have it. So people might have just taken a photo.
Oh, okay. So if you have it, we don't have to have this conversation. Does anybody not have it?
I think I can find it.
Okay, I hope you find it. If you didn't have it, you'd have to print that photo, and then we'd have to go back to look at the plans, and you wouldn't be getting credit for your house right away, that's for sure. We could probably sort things out. But we basically have to do the resubmission based on the plans, and meanwhile your house would be sitting. Yeah?
So we need to do a resubmission anyways for the key. We can do that.
I'm not sure, but we'll figure something out. Look at the desk in front of you. Raise your hand if your solar house foundation, the entire base, is smaller than the desk. And raise your hand if the base is larger than the desk in front of you. Go back and cut that. So you have what, like a big yard on there around your house?
Big mountain range.
What are we talking on Thursday is like the hillside ones that it's true, we'll make it bigger than the house, but since we don't use the hillside one,
Good talk. Yes.
we don't have to build our own trees out there.
You don't have to build your own trees. Any other questions? I want to help. There's no need for mystery. I don't want you to be frustrated and disappointed. Are there any other questions? Listen carefully to this fun fact. You may not bring your solar house in early. You must send one person out to their car after period 1 to walk it back in for period 2. And so, you know, if Maria is late, but her group mates say, no, she went to grab the house, she'll be back in 3 minutes, then okay, cool, we'll wait for Maria to be late a few minutes, and she had to go to the car and go get the house. As long as your group mates are here to say who the loser was but had to walk back, and you're not too late, it wouldn't be a problem. Yeah.
Maybe 2 people walking back.
How big is your house?
It's just heavy, yeah. It's fragile.
I guess so. Okay. You'll have to convince me that it required 2 people. How's that? No problem. The worst that could happen is I might get tardy and nobody cares. It's just cool.
It just falls.
Or it just falls, and I don't care either. It's just cool. Anything else about the solar house models, which are due tomorrow? How heavy is that thing?
It's made out of the hard backer stuff, so it's just on that. It'd be sketchy to like carry.
Gotcha. A few pieces of hardy backer.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't carry with one person.
I mean, you could, but it would just be scary.
Yeah.
Because I would want to drop it and then ruin the entire project.
How big? How big is that?
It's just like, it's like the size of the desk. It's the right size.
Okay. Cool.
It's just, I'm attached to it. I don't want it to break. It's
Sure.
Just, There's a long writing on it.
I can understand that. I can totally understand that. I mean, when I made my bathroom, we had a lot of sheets of hardy backer, so I'm just thinking like full sheet of hardy. Okay, all right. Yeah. Maybe I'm stronger than you. Yeah, you go. I said it. Okay. Any other questions about the solar house model, which is due tomorrow? The Ecotopia quiz is today at lunch. How many of you are prepared to turn in your Ecotopias now? Pass them up to me, please. Either way. Daisy O, can you please unlock the right test cabinet? I think it's this one, but I could be wrong. And then see if the grade is 8 or 9. Can you turn it later? Hey, excuse me? Excuse me? How many of you plan to take the Ecotopia quiz later today? I got to make copies of the quiz for you. Raise your hand if you're going to take it today. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, that's 7. Just checking, because I thought that there was like a Scrabble for the books. I must be mistaken. Okay, cool. Daisy-O, maybe in the blue number 5 or number 6? Maybe it, I hope it's in one of those. Yeah, check drawers for grades. Okay, and now we start unit number 10.
Is this the second last unit?
This is the second to last unit, and it's the last real unit. Look, here's the, I have the original out. Here's the study guide for the next unit. That's it.
Yes.
So, unit 11 is not really a unit. And if everybody could please look up, I'd like to give you a little sample of where we're going here. And you'll notice that it's not written on, so this is all just kind of guesstimates. 10.1 and 10.3 are due this week. That's both chapters. On Friday, we have a lab. I'll go over the pre-lab in a minute. Monday, Tuesday, there's a couple of smaller assignments. Wednesday, the movie goals you'll make today, the post-lab based on this, and we'll review. I think on Thursday, we'll have the Unit 10 exam. And then on Friday, thank you, I'll be introducing Unit 11 and review. We will get 2 weeks of review. Those 2 weeks will include the Unit 11 quiz and the Semester 2 final. And right after those, on the 4th of May, you'll be taking the AP test. I can't hear you.
Are we using the Smarty Pants guide?
Hey, buddy, hold on a second. She's so quiet. What?
Are we using the Smarty Pants guidebook that you told us to get as a class or just individual?
That's for your personal study, and if you don't need it, you don't have to buy it. I didn't say that you needed it, but if you were to buy a study guide, that's the one that I would recommend. And I'll go over that. Each of you will get roughly this much stuff for the process of review. Roughly. And so we'll have a 2-week review, which is mostly stuff that you do at home. In class, we do some finish Unit 11, some basic like strategy on testing. We spend a lot of time talking about the extra credit assignments that you're doing to pace out your review process. Oh, your packet of packets will be due in here somewhere? That's why you kept all your papers all year? Yeah, that's why you keep all papers all year.
Yeah.
First page of the syllabus, right? That thing. Yeah, it is kind of funny when we get to this part of the school year.
Huh?
I can't wait. I can't wait. I will laugh and laugh and laugh.
You giving us more credit for the work we've already done?
Yep. Just for keeping it. Tons of credit. Yeah, yeah.
What?
It's awesome.
What?
I know.
My storage containers.
I know.
Wow. Sweet. When?
Am I the only person that finds this funny? I find this hilarious. Hilarious.
I don't find what.
Yeah.
I don't. I was paying attention.
Hey, did anybody here listen to that podcast series called Serial?
I'm totally serial.
I'm just wondering how that reaches different demographics. How many of you know of the podcast program Serial?
Wait, what's it about?
Yeah, okay. All right. Now that that's behind us, please look up this week 10.1, 10.3, and the pre-lab, which you grabbed on your way in. You'll need the materials procedure, the calculation tables from the back, and the pre-lab questions. I've made that really obvious so you can circle that content now. And then you'll need a blank sheet of paper and your study guide because you're going to do questions 1 through 8 for assignment 10.2. Yeah, like right now. That, mining information.
Okay.
Come on, beside. Richie.
By no means global.
As you'll see, if we want to clean up our act, there's a lot we can do.
Assignment 10.2 is questions 1 through 8. Please put away all cell phones now.
Liberal propaganda.
Please put away all cell phones.
Liberal propaganda.
And coincidentally, does anybody know why not everything biodegradable biodegrades? Just a quick.
Yes.
Like what happens if you throw biodegradable stuff in the trash? Will it biodegrade? It's biodegradable.
Does it only biodegrade if it is in?
It needs to be exposed to air.
It needs to decompose.
Yeah.
Decomposers,
Anaerobic things.
oxygen, that sort of stuff.
Yep. Quickly is the aerobic thing.
Also need some water. So decomposition in like a compost pile is pretty rapid, especially if you're mixing the compost. How many of you know that you have to agitate a compost pile? Okay. So that's the whole concept, like stirring up the water and providing oxygen. Okay. This will be my third request. Please put away all cell phones.
This is Freshgills, the world's largest garbage dump, politely called a landfill. It's in New York, the largest city in the nation whose citizens produce the most garbage anywhere in the world, about a ton each per year. This mound of garbage will soon be the second highest point on the east coast of the United States. Garbage dumping is an environmental hazard. Every day, at least 1 million gallons of toxic liquid leak out of the dump into the surrounding bay. Dumped garbage is also a waste of resources. It represents the loss of the raw material and energy it took to manufacture our products in the first place. Altogether, the world throws out more than 4.5 million tons of garbage every day.
I mean, that stuff looks half degraded already.
For the last 15 years, a team of archaeologists has been examining modern America through what it throws out. This strange study, they call it garbology, can reveal our basic attitudes towards resources. Garbologist Bill Rathje.
Garbage is a way of defining a society in terms of resource management. What people consider valuable and what they consider stuff that they want to throw away. Everybody is wasteful. The average household throws away 15% of the solid food that they buy. Don't you make something with rotten banana skins?
But this kind of wastefulness is by no means global. The quantity and variety of garbage that Rasji and his students handle is peculiar to wealthy countries.
It's almost full.
The first thing you learn is it's only really affluent societies like ourselves that can afford to throw a lot of garbage away. And it's only societies like ourselves that can afford to look at garbage as a problem. For most third world countries, Latin America, South America, the Middle East, most of these countries, garbage is a valuable resource.
Go to the desk in front of you. Thanks.
Go to a garbage disposal site and you'll see all sorts of people picking it over. You'll see people collecting bits of metal, bits of textiles, bottles, etc. It's something that they use as a valuable commodity, a way to support their lives.
In Lima, Peru, for example, officially condoned scavengers search for these valuable commodities to sell to the city. It's a way for poor people to make a living, but it also makes environmental sense. In rich countries, it's called recycling. Yet in many rich countries, recycling like this is a rarity. Here, 100,000 residents of a San Francisco suburb separate bottles, cans, and paper ready for collection. As landfilling becomes harder, recycling will have to increase. But for the family business that services this area, it's nothing new. Back in the 30s, when America was not so rich, Joe Garbarino's relatives collected garbage and made use of much of it.
They weren't recyclables then. They were what we call stoku. And stoku was an offshoot of stock. And it was stock dividends. There were no stock dividends unless you picked up bottles, cans, and papers.
Although for centuries recycling was the rule throughout Europe and America, just in the last few decades, new wealth has created a throwaway society. But today, as disposal costs skyrocket, Garbarino is finding new markets for many of his recovered materials. Paper goes to Asia for reprocessing. Glass goes to a local plant where it's remelted. Scrap iron and tin also go to Asia. This metal may return to the United States incorporated into new cars. Aluminum is sold internationally. Yard waste is first processed on site. Some fuels the boilers at a local paper mill. The rest is sold as fertilizer. For Joe Garbarino, recycling is good business, but he understands the environmental benefits as well.
You save an awful lot of energy in recycling because when you melt, for instance, glass down, it's 2/3 the energy that it takes to melt sand and turn sand into glass instead of heating glass, melting it, and turning that. The energy savings alone there are tremendous on a nationwide basis. And this was the same with aluminum. You would have to go to foreign countries and get 5 tons of bauxite, which is...
By the way, that's a vocab term later. You can write it down now or some other time. But bauxite is aluminum ore. It's the dirt from which you make aluminum.
Dirt, bring it here, turn that into 1 ton of aluminum. So by recycling your aluminum right back into aluminum, you save an awful lot of energy. And it's the same with the paper. Taking 17 mature pulp trees out of a forest, bringing them in to make 1 ton of newspaper, and in the meantime, nationally and worldwide, we're getting these particular materials and putting them into a hole in the ground and putting dirt over it. It's criminal.
Although recycling makes such obvious sense, the American tax system takes the opposite view. In the nation that consumes the most resources in the world, a series of subsidies encourages activities like logging and mining. Recycling enjoys no such benefit.
One of the biggest problems is that the government is still subsidizing the people that ship virgin materials. They're giving them a tax break, and they're not giving it to those of us in the recycling business that are taking that same product that was virgin, reused now, called recycling. We're shipping it back to be reused, and we're not getting any tax breaks on that.
Joe Garbarino is a recycling enthusiast. He feeds his herd of prize-winning pigs on discarded food. Overall, he recycles 25% of his area's garbage, vastly more than America as a whole, which only recycles 10%. But in theory, 80% recycling is possible. although this will never be achieved without substantial government encouragement.
Mom, how you doing today? Come on.
The world's garbage dumps are filled with untapped resources. But in recent years, they've also become littered with wrappers and packages in unprecedented amounts.
On the store shelves all over America, Ripple Spoil packaging and labels possess unequal selling and protection magic.
Packaging was the miracle of American marketing. Use it once, then throw it away. Recycling was never intended. The mix of materials made it impossible anyway. Packaging took advantage of the synthetic materials produced by the post-war petrochemical industry, materials designed to be indestructible.
Can you tear it? It's almost impossible. Does it dry out, get brittle, to chip, peel, or crack?
40 years later, American industry is beginning to sell a new packaging vision. EnviroPacks, they call this one. Now they're pitching environmental values.
So here's the deal, and it's a big deal. I promise to clean up my room. If, big if, you promise to clean up your act too. See these? They're EnviroPacks. Use them to refill your old bottles. They're made of a whole lot less plastic. So you got a whole lot less to throw away, which is cool, environmentally speaking.
The thin EnviroPacks, here being test marketed in Canada, use less plastic, and the packaging itself is designed for easier recycling. The heavy plastic container is meant to be refilled many times. It's a partial return to older habits. Procter & Gamble, the manufacturer, calculates that less packaging will save money for them and the consumer. And they're hoping that the lack of convenience will be outweighed by customers' environmental concern. Company executive Doug Mosley.
Have you guys noticed how those are like all over the supermarket now?
Yeah, I've never seen one.
So if you're from other countries, you've seen those. As a matter of fact, in a whole bunch of countries, that's just become the way that everything is packaged. Usually because energy is more expensive in other places, so shipping is more expensive, so you can just get a lot more containers of detergent if they're in like soft, pillowy bags that pack into a dense little box. It's a funny thing, but actually for a while there, this was a trend in the United States. And then something about marketing, people just like bigger packages. Of course, it's also, we have so many valuable things that are small. There's a lot of electronics and stuff that we have to package. And so dollars of retail item per pound of packaging were dropping. And then they kind of picked up, and then with the electronics world, everything has kind of skyrocketed. Nowadays, we throw out more packaging per dollar of economy than ever in the history of America. The opposite of the trend is what we're talking about.
I think solid waste is a real issue in society, and as a responsible member of society, we think we need to do our part to reduce it. I could also say it's a business opportunity. We think by being first in the market with this EnviroPack, we're going to gain competitive advantage versus our major competitors and gain market share. So I guess I would put them together and call it enlightened self-interest.
If all the plastic containers on the supermarket shelf were replaced by environmentally friendly versions, it would indeed help relieve the pressure on landfills. But by how much? Excavating landfills is one way to find out, and that's what archaeologist Bill Rathje and his team are doing here in Sunnyvale, California. Contrary to popular opinion, he finds that the plastics are less of a problem than other things.
Plastic is really a very small portion of landfills. It's about 5% by weight, not much more than that by volume when you consider that almost all of it is squashed. Newspapers, on the other hand, are 10 to 16% of landfills by both weight and volume. They're the largest single identifiable commodity in landfills.
for anyone but an archaeologist, there's another surprise about those newspapers.
October 7th, 1965. When I first started digging landfills, it wasn't very surprising to me that we found newspapers that were 10 years old. You know, archaeologists have dug up paper that's 2,000 years old. But a lot of people I talked to began saying, wow, 10 years old? I thought newspapers degraded in a couple of months or a couple of years. So we began realizing that in people's minds, there's sort of a mythology that newspapers will biodegrade very rapidly. Oh, look! Pianos. Landscape. Draperies. Truth, Justice, The American Way, and phone books.
Could the garbage in landfills be made to decay? RAFG sends samples to Jean Wagner, a geologist who's working to identify ideal landfill conditions. She compares the effects of adding new elements like bacteria. To date, the single most influential additive has been water.
What's interesting here is that we have 5 bottles, and in each of the bottles we put 25 grams of landfill refuse from the same sample, from the same depth, from the same landfill. And the only difference between what went in these bottles was the amount of moisture we added. You can see the tremendous difference in the degree of decomposition between the sample which had no additional moisture and the sample which had 100 milliliters of additional moisture.
Moisture may work in the laboratory, but in real landfills it creates its own problems. As it percolates down, it picks up inks, paint, and other chemicals from the garbage. The result is called leachate, a toxic liquid that leaks out, contaminating streams and groundwater. But leachate can be controlled by simply lining the landfill with huge sheets of rubber, like this. It's a common practice in many industrial countries, only recently made compulsory in the United States. And well-designed landfills can even yield benefits. The benefits can be seen in Jean Wagner's decomposing garbage samples. As the garbage breaks down, it produces methane gas, which can be drawn off. That means that garbage dumps are potential energy sources. This site receives 13,000 tons of Los Angeles garbage a day. It's America's largest modern landfill and the world's largest producer of methane from garbage. The landfill's earth covering is peppered with collection pipes, which channel the gas to an on-site power plant. The landfill is fully lined, so the operators can encourage decomposition by adding moisture, in this case, sewage sludge. Disposal costs are 10 times less here than elsewhere, because the power plant generates 1% of Los Angeles' electricity, enough for 100,000 local homes. Although America produces more methane this way than any other country, garbage remains an essentially untapped resource. Jean Wagner.
It represents a very cheap source of energy for us if we care to tap it. At the present time, there are about 70 commercial landfill gas facilities across the United States. Now that's still a relatively small percentage considering we have perhaps some 9,000 landfills in existence in this country.
This is newspaper recycling in Japan. It's a long-established practice here, and it shows an attitude to resources quite different from the United States. It's called tissue paper exchange, for the token rolls of toilet paper given out. Japan, an island nation, used to be careful with resources, but now with increasing wealth, attitudes are changing. People favor virgin materials, and the exchange rate encourages imports. So, as America recycles more, Japan recycles less, showing that economic forces are often stronger than environmental values. Company President Matsuzawa.
釣り紙交換の仕事はあまり今のところは良くないですね。
The tissue paper exchange business is not doing well now.
例を挙げますと、まず円高で。
For example, because of the yen-dollar exchange rate, American recycled paper and pulp are inexpensive when imported to Japan.
どんどん そうしますと日本国内の
So naturally, the price I get for my paper keeps going down.
自然的に値段が下がる。
Since 1985, half the paper recyclers in Tokyo have closed. Increasing wealth has brought more than American recycled paper to Japan. Fast food and the disposable society have arrived with a vengeance. The amount of garbage is rapidly increasing, but so are imaginative ways of dealing with it. This popular public garden, built on a landfill in Tokyo Bay, is one answer to what the government's chief solid waste scientist, Masuro Tanaka, sees as the new throwaway Japan.
My mother always taught me material is very important. Everything's coming from God, and all oil is coming from outside. So deal with material carefully. But nowadays, young people are, rich and enjoy every day. So very wasteful.
These are sanitation workers in Machida, a suburb of Tokyo. They run a waste management program considered a model for all of Japan, maybe even the world. One of the secrets of their success is their active solicitation of community interest in waste. Today's parade announces a battery collection day later in the month. Batteries are recognized as too toxic to throw away with other trash. The engineer behind the program, a true visionary of garbage, is Tadayuki Yoshida, and he's given himself a catchy stage name. In Machida, residents have asked to divide their garbage into 5 categories. Today, they bring only organics, like food waste, to the collection point. Waste number 1 always attends.
To encourage cooperation from the people.
It seems almost absurd to imagine American participation at this level. In some cities in Japan, people have as many as 9 different waste streams. We can't even get people to put the recycling in the big blue one labeled recycling, which is the same color everywhere. In Japan, people have to use their own containers to independently separate glass, different types of metal, organic waste, paper and cardboard, hazardous materials, and a few others that I can't remember. And I think it's kind of amazing to imagine a society where people have that degree of cooperative investment, where people are like, yeah, I'm going to pitch in to like all of us together will solve this problem. I don't know. For me, it's sort of remarkable just to point out that this is sort of like how Japan does things, but I'm sure you all realize that Japan kind of does it.
I ask them deeply from the bottom of my heart to work together. That is why I bow. So each citizen of Machida must join in considering what waste really is, so that they can appreciate waste as a resource and can recognize that waste should be reused. Let's recycle. Let's start a culture from here. I want Machida to be a cradle of waste recycling culture.
The MRC, the Machida Recycling Center, is headquarters for the Waste Management Program. It's a community center, a place for school trips and adult education classes. There's even a daycare program for the town's handicapped. Here, waste number 1 makes education a priority. Sensible waste management, he says, must become second nature. Waste types must be separated to be recycled. Toxic items like batteries that contain mercury need special handling. Bottles can be reused directly. The key idea is that good waste management is systematic. Separate some, recycle some. And if that's done right, the rest can be successfully handled in a way that would shock many non-Japanese. They incinerate the rest, organics, soiled paper, and light plastics. It's called integrated waste management, common in Europe and Japan, but unknown in America. At Machida, the incinerator is run meticulously, as it has to be, to work correctly. The furnace is constantly monitored and adjusted to suit the particular waste composition. Mistakes can lead to unacceptably high levels of pollutant emissions, in spite of the fact that the plant is fitted with stacked scrubbers. But, as waste number 1 explains, toxic emissions like dioxins or heavy metals are avoided, because the materials that would generate them are never allowed to reach the incinerator in the first place. American incinerators aren't this good, according to Alan Hershkowitz, an expert in incinerator technology.
Basically, the facilities that burn garbage in the United States are classic industrial giants. They are filthy, they're noisy, to some extent they're smelly. They're not the kind of facilities that we see in Japan, where they are literally clean enough to take third-grade school children through them. In fact, visiting garbage burning facilities in Japan, you have to take your shoes off and put on slippers and put on white gloves so you don't get the facilities dirty.
This is one of the key distinctions that I have to highlight. In a high-tech incinerator, you're really careful about what goes in, and you manage the combustion chamber very, very carefully. The funny thing is, probably the most environmentally sensitive way to handle waste is to burn it, but not like in a big, giant, black cloud, open pit fire of toxicity like my old neighbor used to do up on the mountain. But in like a really fancy incinerator, where all the different waste streams are very carefully categorized, and the incinerator chamber has injection of different gases and careful temperature adjustments. If you burn it right, you basically just get basic gases coming out. If you burn it right, and that's actually really technically complicated.
Incinerators have a bad name in America, but it's not because they don't work. It's because they have never been run properly.
These technologies can achieve their optimal removal efficiencies for all the pollutants of concern only under very precise operating protocol. Unfortunately, the workers required, the kind of worker training required to operate these facilities at those levels of efficiency doesn't exist in the United States.
One result is that nobody wants an incinerator in their backyard. Integrated waste management programs are hard to adopt in America, as protests mount over badly run facilities.
Our gardens don't produce like they used to. And I do think that a lot of this, the particulates that are dropping onto our ground, and they're going to be here forever.
We want clean air. We don't want something that's going to put any more into it.
We just have to learn to say no and let them know we need it.
Until American waste is managed systematically, including both recycling and incineration, protests like these will continue.
The biggest problem are the incinerators, because they fight for this waste stream.
Useless films and plastics that are not recyclable don't need to be part of the waste stream. These things go up in smoke, and they're a major contributor to the acid rain problem.
What we're doing in the United States is we're taking non-combustible materials like glass and metals, we're taking recyclable materials like paper and plastics, and we're throwing them into furnaces. We're denying U.S. industry of substantial resources, and we're giving U.S. citizens a lot of reason to scream and yell about the development of garbage burning facilities that are going to unfund recycling and cause toxic air emissions.
This part of Machida's waste management system is not even contemplated in America. The toxic incinerator ash is stabilized with cement, forming pellets. The pellets are then landfilled, where they'll provide a stable base for a future park or golf course. Finally, Machida's landfill, like all in Japan, is of course lined, and any leachate produced is channeled off to a treatment plant. To Masaru Tanaka, expensive processes like these are unavoidable.
We have to minimize the pollutions, so we cannot consider, that is too expensive or economic. Japanese choice is this is solution, no other choice.
Clean water sustaining a field of lotus plants is the end product of the leachate purification system. It's an astute demonstration of Machida's waste management success. Like everything else here, it's the brainchild of Waste Number One, designed to help the community accept their incinerator. Japan's most striking example of reaping benefits from garbage is the Tokyo Bay landfill. New York has Freshkills. Tokyo has this. The gardens, pool, and gymnasium are heated by the world's third largest incinerator. Japan's waste management works, socially and environmentally.
So combining of recycling and incineration, material recovery and energy recovery, that both together, that is future waste management policy in Japan.
Waste management has not always been a success in Japan. In the 1970s, there were even violent protests, but involving a different kind of waste. For more than a decade, dumping by the Chiso Chemical Company had caused hundreds of deaths and crippled thousands. This notorious tragedy was one of the first clear cases of human disease from industrial toxic waste.
This is coincidentally one of the most formative events in modern Japanese culture. The same way that 3 Mile Island sort of shaped the American conversation about nuclear energy, or Chernobyl for the Belarusians and the USSR. Minamata Bay disease was like a really big whoop for modern Japanese conversation about food and about toxins and about health.
Contamination. The victims suffered nervous system damage, which in some cases was passed on to children. Minamata disease, as it came to be called, was caused by methylmercury discharged into Minamata Bay.
What kind of mercury?
Methyl.
Anybody know what that means?
It's a different type.
That's right, it's got CH something. It's got a methyl group, so your cells think it's useful. When we're talking about methylated or methylation, the process of attaching a carbon and a hydrogen that make things appear useful to your cells, that's the type that was dumped out into the water, so that went straight into fish, and those fish went straight into people.
The poison became concentrated in the marine life, eaten locally. Today, with the mercury still in the bay, there's a joint effort by the government and the company to dredge the seafloor. Fishing is no longer allowed, but the ban is not easy to enforce. So authorities are collecting and grinding contaminated fish. The resulting pulp is stored in tanks because no way has yet been found to dispose of this toxic legacy. The Minamata poisonings were followed by toxic waste disasters in many parts of the globe. Lekkerkerk in Holland and Love Canal in America are two on a long list of communities hit by the new scourge of the industrial world. Most countries have responded with effective regulations, none more than in the United States, as Joe Hirshhorn, a congressional advisor on hazardous waste, explains.
The regulatory system we have in place today, with its criminal penalties, has made large corporations very, very sensitive to the possibility of creating the Love Canals of the future. Big corporations want to avoid cleanup costs, which can amount to hundreds of millions of dollars just for one location. So the regulatory system will prevent the creation of many future Love Canals. But the regulatory system is never perfect.
One problem with regulation is it needs vigilant enforcement. This Los Angeles police unit regularly checks sewers for surreptitious dumping. The first environmental crimes strike force in the world, it has already sent 50 executives to jail for these newly recognized offenses. Chief Prosecutor John Lynch.
At first blush, an environmental crime may not seem as serious as, for example, a robbery or a murder. But if you look at the impact on society as a whole, if you take something like a toxic cloud, contamination of a groundwater supply, that makes a single act of murder even pale because the murder has one victim. And you may extend that to the immediate family. And you may talk about some hypothetical damage to society that a murderer exists and this violent act has occurred. If you talk about contamination of a groundwater supply or poisoning the air, you can be talking about affecting thousands of people for 10 or 20 or 30 years. That's a significant violent act against the society as a whole. And it is a crime.
The strike force has to cope with thousands of industries which handle an enormous variety of hazardous materials. But it's hard to know exactly what goes on down there. So this can never be the perfect solution to industrial waste problems.
It has become very expensive to do things correctly, to dispose of hazardous waste and to treat it or to recycle it. And as a consequence of that, I think you see an awful lot of mid-sized to small businesses that try to cut corners economically, that violate the criminal law.
There is an entirely different way to approach industrial waste, and it's worked successfully here in Denmark for 20 years. This is one of a national network of 21 government-run collection points for hazardous waste. Every factory has one within 30 miles. The only obligation? To make the delivery and report the contents. Although to be safe, samples are always taken for analysis. From here, the government...
Is it class over?
Yeah,
So what am I supposed to do? What are your other teachers doing? I think they had a class, right? Please.